Mrs. Sugars, will you please take roll call?
Mrs. Arroyo. Here. Ms. Friedel.
Here.
Mr. Goodwin.
Here.
Mrs. Matlack.
Here.
Mrs. Neary.
Here.
Mr. Avadia.
Here.
Mrs. Schultz.
Here.
Mrs. Tong. Mrs. Seidel.
Here. Okay, next I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash. We have a presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. I'm very excited because of the presentation that's going to be done tonight, and that the board is taking the opportunity to honor the Cherry Hill Education Foundation. The Cherry Hill Education Foundation, as many of you know, is an independent organization whose sole goal is to raise and donate money to the school district in order to benefit the children. An incredible amount of work that's been done, certainly over the course of the last decade and a half, and even farther back. So I'm very excited to welcome some folks here representing the Education Foundation. And we're here tonight, we're specifically going to talk about a new grant process that the Education Foundation administered this year. So in the past, there's been a competitive grant process where folks would have to fill out an application and put information in. The Ed Foundation would meet and discuss and try to raise money and go through. What they did this year is that the Ed Foundation allotted $3,500 to each one of the 19 schools in the district. And then the school had a discussion internally about what it is that they wanted to do with those monies, submit the projects, had to go through the regular approval process, go through me, come to the board, which you have gone through and done the approvals. So more than $60,000 this year that's been donated and was donated up front and the very beginning by the Ed Foundation. In addition to that, there's almost $10,000 additional dollars that have been donated in projects. And I think Mr. Bart's going to put up, or Mrs. Wilson's going to put up, we have some examples of the projects. They're going to flow up behind me. So in a moment or so, I'm going to have Mrs. Wilson join me at the podium, and we're going to ask Mrs. Eleanor Stoffman, who is the chairperson of the board, the exec board for the Ed Foundation. But I just want to give a little bit of background that Mrs. Stoffman provided for us about who makes up the Cherry Hill Education Foundation Board of Trustees. So in addition to community members, parents, and grandparents of Cherry Hill students, currently on the board are 3 former presidents of the Cherry Hill Board of Education. There is life after the Board of Education. And currently those members are Eleanor Stoffman, former Board of Education president, Mr. David Malotsky, who's here this night as well, former Board of Education member and president, and Ms. Kathy Judge, former Board of Education member and president. A former Cherry Hill Board of Education member, and Jay Halpern. I don't know if Mrs. Halpern is here tonight. Former Public Information Officer of the Cherry Hill Schools, Susan Bassnagel. There are current students from High School East and from High School West, retired Cherry Hill teachers, retired Cherry Hill employees, current Cherry Hill teachers, current Cherry Hill employees, alumni of the Cherry Hill School District who live here in town and don't have children in the district yet, as well as former PTA presidents. It's an incredible collection. When I have the opportunity to visit with the group, to see the people that are seated around the table, because truly it's a who's who of people that have donated the majority of their lives, for sure over the past 35 or more years, to Cherry Hill and to the Cherry Hill School District. So Mrs. Stoffman, if you'd join Mrs. Wilson and I at the podium.
Have something to present at the same time. You said a little more, it's 66,500 to be exact, in addition to the other ones. So I don't know where you would like to formally present. Sure, I would like to. I have something with me.
She's like me. Say if you're just a couple.
Just have just a few things. But I know, that's what I'm going to do. Thank you on behalf of our entire Board of Trustees. Would they please stand to be recognized? It's certainly a joint effort because without the support of the Board of Education, without the support of the administration, without the support of our teachers union and the supervisors and the principals of the schools and the teachers and the students, we would not be able to do our job. And the township as well has been supportive of everything we do. So when you have all of these people behind you, you just can't not miss. And everybody is always rooting for us. And so I'm going to put a little plug in. Dancing with the Cherry Hill Stars is our signature fundraising event. And that's how really the majority of the money is raised. This is our 13th year for doing Dancing with the Cherry Hill Stars. Dr. Malash danced the first year. School board members danced. Now we have new school board members, so I have my eye on a few of the new people. The people usually back away from me at this time of the year because we're in the middle of doing it. We have a few spots left, so we'd like to talk to you afterwards. In addition to the individual schools receiving their money, Dr. Malash did allude to this. We also do every year donations to the freshman orientation at East and West. We pay for the T-shirts. We're still doing that. We also have an annual academic brunch where seniors from East and West are invited for a brunch at Lucian's Manor. Their parents come along. We have over 500 people. We're still doing that. We also have project graduation at East and West. We upped our donation to $1,500 to East and $1,500 to West. We are continuing with our scholarships for students graduating from East, West, and the alternative high school, and scholarship awards for graduating 8th graders at each of the middle schools. So that's in addition to the $66,500 that we want to do all the time. And so before I sit down, what I also wanted to do is hand out these booklets to each of our school board members, because this I refer to as our Bible. Thank you. This represents, since 2007, a little more than $1,200,000 in grants and donations we've given to all 19 schools and the school district. And inside the booklet is listed by each school a bullet of each grant that they've received since 2007. So we're very proud of this. It tells the story of who we are and what we've been doing over the years. And when we meet with sponsors for Dancing with the Stars and sponsors for our golf tournament, we show them this, and we show them this to all the dancers who are raising money to be in the show, because this is where the proceeds have gone, and that's where we'll continue to do through, we think, this new process of giving to each school will probably be the way we'll go. So I just wanted each person to have something to take home with them. And again, I cannot thank enough my board members, because we not only have hardworking people, but we have a good time. And we love to be with each other, and I love to see them, and we're always helping each other out. And without them, this could not happen. So thank you. You know, our salaries keep increasing every year.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoffman. And Mrs. Stoffman, if you would have the Board of Trustees join you, shake hands, and then Mrs. Wilson wants to get a picture of all of you together out in the front hallway with the big check, if we could do that, so that we can do that and then post it. So if you all would come around and shake hands, all of your folks.
All right, so I know it's going to be hard to top that, but does anybody have any correspondence?
But it is exciting nonetheless. I have two pieces to report on. On Saturday, I attended the African American Culture Clubs of East and West celebration of Black History Month, and they did a wonderful original production over at West titled Our Music, Our Story, 100 Years of Making Our Voices Heard. It was, all I can say, it was incredible. Each year when the students do this, and it's original production each year, I'm always amazed at the talent of our students. And this year was no exception. And the students who were up there performing were not just performing. You could tell that that the teachers and the staff and the community members who worked with them had taught them the background of some of these songs that they might not have ever heard of before, or may have heard but had no idea what the historical context of those songs were. And because the way they performed them, you could just tell the feeling behind it, the emotion behind it, and their enthusiasm. Great production. If you didn't get a chance to go, make time next year to go. It won't be the same one, but I'm sure it will be just as great. The other item I have to report on is today was the monthly Cultural Proficiency Equity Character Education Committee meeting, and I represented the district at that. Couple of points that I wanted to share about that. Let's see, there were progress reports from the school teams on their cultural proficiency and equity lessons, and they talked about, the schools spoke about what they were doing during Black History Month. Some of the schools just spoke about it, some of them had little PowerPoints, some had pictures, and the schools that reported out this time, although it was not all of them, but there was something done at every school. The ones that reported out to us were Kilmer, Kingston, Knight, Rosa, Beck, and West. We talked about the Rowan University impact visit to High School West, which I'm sure Dr. Malash will talk more about when he gives his comments at the next meeting, perhaps. But Mr. Goodwin was there and offered words on behalf of the board as well. And it is a tremendous program that encourages young men of color to go into the field of education. And it encourages students from Rowan to belong to this program and get to know more about it, and bringing them up to West. The students from East and West were invited to come as well and participate. It sounded like it was a great day overall for all involved. And the other thing that the board and community members are invited to two events. At West on February 21st, they are having a West Living Museum, which started with the Central Park 5, was their inspiration for it this year. And it's at 4 to 6 p.m., February 21st. And February 29th, to round out the month, East is having a cook-in to celebrate the end of Black History Month. And both of those, Ashley Giles and Yanel Holiday, I asked them both, Dr. Malash, to send those invitations formally to your office to be passed on to the board. So we should be getting that. The dates are February 21st and February 29th, if you want to put them in your calendars. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. Anyone else?
I do.
Okay, Mrs. Schultz?
So on February 5th, myself and Mrs. Neary attended the third meeting for the Alternative Funding Committee. We started to talk about public and private partnerships. So one of the members of the committee actually researched public-private partnerships, and she provided some detailed information back to the committee. It was actually a 2-page document that outlined what was public-private partnerships. It outlined the pros and the cons of public-private partnerships and provided this document to the entire committee. There's a lot of good information because I know that public-private partnerships, or P3 as it's also referred to, a lot of that information is out there. Something that was brought up is, I guess, Rowan is currently exploring public-private partnerships right now. And one thing to note, though, that I felt was important, so I made a note of, is that public-private partnerships, though, is not part of your district's debt services. Dr. Malash then discussed fair funding for the group and kind of just gave an overview. So he did give a background on SFRA, reviewed how we have been receiving less state aid so that the budget is primarily being shouldered by the taxpayers. He described how this helped form the Fair Funding Committee. They are looking for lots of community members, so I encourage those to help join that group. He walked us through the draft letter that will go out to Senator Sweetie and explained basically the history of the state of Cherry Hill and how badly we are underfunded. He also passed out the history of the district document. That document is also located on our website, which also has dates and lots of information about the district's underfundedness. I don't know that that's really a word, but I just made that up. But kind of worked. And then the third document that Dr. Malash provided was the new strategic planning process document, which was the 2020 walk document that we received at the last meeting, which was well received by the committee. So the back half of the meeting was where we split the committee into 2 groups, and we started to talk about, we asked the group to get into discussions about the alternative revenue, or asked for alternative revenue recommendations with 3 things in mind. We looked for capital recommendations, enhancements, and tax relief. And then we wanted to know about getting the word out and the future of the actual committee. So we brainstormed for about 20 minutes, and then we came back, and then we started to look at some of the recommendations from the members. So it was interesting. We were on 2 sides of the room, but when we came back, the recommendations for the committees were kind of parallel. So don't want to go into a lot of the recommendations from the members, because our final meeting is April 21st, and at that meeting is when the committee is going to talk about their final recommendations to the Board of Ed. So that's going to be discussed at that last meeting. So any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Any other correspondence? Mr. Goodwin.
I just wanted to give a brief update about the impact meeting that I was able to attend on Friday. I thought it was a really inspiring meeting. It was a great meeting. There were, I believe, about 15 students from Rowan, and but there were also close to, when I looked at the auditorium, it seemed like about 100 folks between the students from High School West and High School East who came and attended, and it was really inspirational, because it was really talking about the need to have African American males in going into the education field. And we heard from Mr. Guy, who kind of led the meeting, and then there was also Dr. Morton spoke, Dr. Smith, Dr. Mahan, and Dr. Malash. And I also had an opportunity to give a brief introduction. And I really appreciated the group. And it is really a number of the students from Rowan especially are already in the impact program. And it was also encouraging some of the students from East and West to consider. And I know for me personally, I thought it was good, because I know my personal story in terms of how I had African American males in my life to impact me. So I took it very personally from that perspective. So it was a really good meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. We're going to move into our board committee reports, and I'll ask Mrs. Matlack to discuss C&I.
Thank you very much. Let me just pull up my notes here. Okay, we had a few items on our agenda. We started with Mrs. Rockhill talking to us about the therapy dogs that are going to be at Barkley. She provided an overview of the program, and the dogs will be in special classes at Barkley. The discussion included the purpose of the program, the target population, plans for students who are afraid of dogs and who are allergic to dogs. And it will be, the group who will be bringing the dogs in is the Alliance for Therapy Dogs, and it will be for students in self-contained classrooms at Barkley. They will be coming in half an hour visit per classroom, and the plan is to just have one dog at a time in the building. And so there will be permission forms that will go home to the parents and information to the parents that will go home as well before the program starts. So the committee had some questions about the logistics of that, and but everybody seemed like, from what was described and what was heard, that it sounds like a great program for the littlest of our students in the district. Next, we talked about the course of study, the scheduling process for current freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. Dr. Mahan reviewed the plans to schedule through Genesis this year, which will include counselor communication and providing recommendation via Genesis as well. The course selection booklet is posted, and there will be directions to parents, and there will be at the time, this may have changed, there will be a 2-week window for the students. Okay, that's still the same then. 2-week window. Then we talked about the summer reading, the middle school summer reading. There were 4 books that came to us. 3 of them were for the middle school. 1 is for the high school, and I'll read you those titles. There is Harbor Me by Jacqueline Woodson for 6th grade, Refugee by Alan Gratz for 7th grade, Before We Were Free by Julia Alvarez for 8th grade, and then Born a Crime by Trevor Noah for 10th grade. So those were presented to us, and each of the committee members took home a book. We will read through it and then come back to our next meeting with that and discuss it. The last item on our agenda was the play at West that is going to be performed by the Circle Club, and it is The Trials of Alice in Wonderland. And the Circle Club, please correct me if I misspeak here, is a group of our special needs students and group of typically developing students who work together on a theatrical production. And I believe it's an extracurricular activity? Yes. It's great production. They're going to do the show on March 28th, and I'm sure that will be advertised and sent to us as well. But it's a great production. The kids are excited about it, and Dr. Mahan said that they went through the play, and it was totally appropriate for the kids to do. So no concerns there. That was all that we had on our agenda. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. Next up, I'm going to ask Mrs. Schultz to discuss B&F.
So BNF, we met Monday, February 3rd at 6:30. Our entire meeting was held in closed session so that we could hold the interviews for the district's architect of record. So because it was held in closed session, there's not much more that I can share. I will let you know that our next meeting is on March 2nd. This will also be in closed session, so I just make that note so that we don't have community members coming thinking they're going to attend a meeting, because unfortunately, we will not be able to allow you to attend that. At that meeting, we are going to be interviewing our solicitors. So with that, are there any questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll turn it over to Mr. Goodwin to discuss what he can about HR.
Okay. I can tell you that we met on February 3rd for our HR meeting. Basically everything was confidential, so I can't tell you much more than that. But we are going to meet again on March 3rd, I believe. No, March 2nd. actually, for our next meeting. It's quite informative.
Thank you. Next up, Mrs. Neary to talk about P&L.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have more to update, unfortunately, than the last two, or fortunately, rather. So we met, and we didn't have any policies for reading at this meeting, so Dr. Smith provided legislative update at this meeting. And there were 4 in particular that we looked at. The first was reduced price lunches. The state covers the difference, so they can become free breakfast and lunch. Will be in effect likely by summer. And then there were questions from other committee members or comments. You know, would we be interested in a summer food program and exploring that in relation to this legislative update? The next legislative update that we reviewed was the security audit checklist for all districts, such as emergency notification systems. Most likely will build off the 90-point assessment or checklist that we have from the Office of Preparedness. Multiple people will work through that. The third update that we had was regarding mental health. Bill would create a single tool statewide to screen mental health of teens. There would be action steps based on the results of the screening. The governor just failed to sign it, so it'll go back through the process again. There was no action taken. He didn't veto it. He just didn't sign it. So that'll go back through the process again, and we'll probably see that sometime in the future. Currently, we offer in Cherry Hill screenings and provide the information regarding provider lists for our parents and our students. I also made notation of the meal fund, which had been discussed amongst other legislative updates, but we're not sure if that has been finalized. We have yet to see that. And we still don't have the regs on these. So once we have them, we'll adjust the policies accordingly once the state provides the regulations. And then we had comment from community members. How does the lunch law affect Barkley? And Dr. Smith would apply it to, you know, it doesn't impact tuition in any way. And then another community member took the opportunity to discuss the impacts on state aid and particular legislation around relief going to county taxes and the impact that would have on our aid and what that would actually look like. So it was a watch out that the community member called forward, and then requested we keep close watch on other communities and districts that are still fighting for their quote unquote overfunding. And that is all I have. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Neary. I'm going to jump in and cover strategic planning. Our last strategic planning meeting was held on Monday, February 3rd at 8 p.m. And as we've been doing for the past months, our first order of business was to do building reviews. And this time we covered 2 of our schools. First, we covered Stockton, which was built in 1970, additions in 94 and 2000, and there's currently 360 students enrolled. Some of the projects that have been completed over the last 2 years include tree removal and roofing repairs. The current projects that are being worked on: new exterior doors, ADA stage accessibility, and main entrance security cameras. And then future improvements include the security suite, including the vestibule, toilet room upgrades, small group instruction spaces, and interior doors and locks. Next, we moved on to Carusi, which is a bit more complicated. It was built in 1961 with 3 sets of additions in 64, 94, and 2000, and there's currently 970 students enrolled at Carusi. Over the last 2 years, some things that have been improved upon: HVAC in the media center, taking care of roof leaks and exterior doors. Currently, they're working on more roof leak repairs and main entrance security cameras. And future is a bit of a big project. In addition to things like the security suite, and upgraded fire detection system, gym renovations. There's a huge list of things like plumbing and electrical items for Carusi. We are and have been extremely limited to what we can do today in Carusi due to asbestos. Basically, we can't do anything above the ceiling because the glue on the ceiling tiles, if I have this right, Mrs. Sugars, have asbestos. So anything that requires going up can't be done. So we can't do wiring up in the ceiling, piping up in the ceiling. So it's been really difficult to make improvements or upgrades or change things at Carusi. So as we discussed during the planning sessions for the last bond referendum, there's a plan in place to work towards these items, a multi-year plan, because will be a multi-year process, starting with the asbestos abatement, one sort of zone, if you will, at a time, to get things done and start to chip away at this big list of improvements and upgrades at Carusi. I just want to add that the specific presentations are all in your committee, your strategic planning committee folder, if you want to take a look at the entire presentation. I just covered some of the highlights from each of them in the interest of time. The next item we covered on our agenda, Dr. Malash gave us a strategic planning process update. As Dr. Malash discussed at the January action meeting, our district strategic goals were announced, and that's very exciting. And just for those of you that are not familiar with them, I think it's important enough. I'm just going to read through them again because they're going to drive our strategic plan over the next 5 years. So our new strategic goals for 2020 and 2025 start with the statement, building upon our strong foundations of academic excellence, inclusion, voice, and cultural proficiency, we will, under the banner of student wellness, create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. Under the banner of purpose and passion, we will develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and a passion for learning. And then under connecting beyond our classrooms, we will provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. These goals grew out of the work of the surveys and of the 2-day strategic planning conference where multiple people and stakeholders from the community came together to come up with these goals. So it was really exciting. And then the next steps in moving forward with these goals are action committees are going to be created. I believe it's one committee for each of the 3 board goals. So more to come on those committees. And we're going to continue to work with Mrs. Judy Wilson, to flesh out those committees and develop action steps as a result of those committees. And then last but not least, we talked about the highly anticipated demographic study. Dr. Richard Grip of Statistical Forecasting shared, we got a sneak peek of the demographic study, or a quick summary of it. The survey, the study is actually in the Friday night folders as well, correct? I thought I saw it. Not yet? Okay. Okay, but it will be out. So more importantly, it was already alluded to earlier in the night that Dr. Grip will be here to present to the full board the full demographic study on March 10th. And then from there, that will open up a whole lot of future discussions, both at strategic planning, at all of our committee meetings really, and at the full board table about our next steps with that information. What topics do we need to start to talk about now that we have this information? So all exciting stuff to come. We did have a public comment that included questions about the cost of building new versus renovating at Carusi, some clarifications about asbestos in the building, including asking to provide more information to the community about building issues on our website, and to consider parental voice in the action plans that will be developed in the future. And our next meeting is on March 2nd as well at 8 p.m. And the next two schools we will cover are Rosa and Cooper at that time. And we'll continue talking about our strategic plan and the demographic study as well. Any questions? Okay. So that brings us to our first public comment period. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. The first public comment session is for agenda items only. There will be another public comment session for any topic at the end of the meeting. If you would like to speak now, please identify the agenda items, speak into the microphone, and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen behind me will indicate the amount of time you have remaining. Thank you.
Hi, Miriam Stern, 121 Ashford Road. I just want to comment on the correspondence that was given about the Alternative Funding Committee, which I'm grateful to be part of. I just want to share publicly, I thought it was a really productive, exciting meeting. There were very 20,000-foot view looks at options, which I think is a big ask of our community to look bigger and think broadly and long term. And I thought that really happened, which was fantastic. Personally, I felt that way. I do want to also mention we discussed the fair funding issue, which as we're getting to this is budget time and funding budgets are coming up. And Dr. Malash, you shared the letter that you wrote to Senator Sweeney, as well as the information that you had, the historical information about fair funding. And I actually was just trying to fact check my memory, because I'm not as good at night, from the meeting, that I believe it said that 20% of our funding for services for kids with special needs, IEPs, 504s, is covered by the funding we get from the state, and the rest is not. If something... I mean, even if it's a little bit more than that, somewhere along, it just was startling to me. So I just made me think about kind of when we have these asks of Senator Sweeney, who has been promoting fully funding extraordinary aid. I think that, you know, Senator Beach, when we met with him, suggested we go for kind of, I hate to use the term low-hanging fruit, but things that would be easier asks for us to be granted. And I think something like, you know, special ed is expensive and needed, and it's very much a part of social and emotional learning, making sure we have inclusive environments. So to me, that makes so much sense to really push on that topic. And I want to say, I was trying to look for the letter and I couldn't find it on my, at least mobile version of the website. And we talked at the alternative funding meeting about the fact that, again, related to fair funding, the overfunded district that Mrs. Neary was referring to, which are pushing back and taking legal action. You know, I looked at one of those districts there on the front page of their website. It has information about their efforts, you know, to save our students. And we talked at alternative funding why we don't have as much recognition in the community for our fair funding. I think we need easier, prominent access to fair funding information on the front page of our website as a first link on the menu. It's just a recommendation to make it easier for people who are looking for information to find it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stern. Anyone else?
Yoni Yaris, 329 Cherry Hill Boulevard. Just a clarification about 14.2. Is the allocation of money the same for the wall project at East, and it's just transferring from line A to line B because bidding was different, or is this now needing to reallocate differently for that project? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Yaris.
Allie Raditich, 1313 Marl Crest Road. I'm speaking on behalf of the student wellness goal. I'm excited for it as a teacher and a parent. And I would just say maybe within the, when the committees meet and have action steps, to consider staff wellness as well, because there is, including admin, teachers, there is that trickle down effect of health and wellness. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, next we'll move into our special action agenda. And I will, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over. We have one appointment that we need to handle first. And it is recommended that Ben Ovadia be appointed as the district's representative to the Camden County Educational Services Commission for a term commencing on February 11th, 2020 until the organization meeting in 2021. Do I need a second? Can I have a second, please? Mrs. Matlack. Any questions? Okay. Do we need to vote on it?
You do.
Okay. Mrs. Sugars.
Voting is open. You can place your votes. And it appears we have a unanimous vote. Congratulations, Mr. Avadia.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia, for representing Cherry Hill at the Educational Services Commission. Okay, now I will turn it back over to Mrs. Matlack to move our C&I agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2019-2020 school year. 2, approval of out-of-district student placements for the 2019-2020 school year. And 3, approval of service contracts with New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired 2019-2020. Do I have a second? Mrs. Schultz. Any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, the online voting is open. Are there any abstentions on particular items in the C&I agenda? Okay, we have a unanimous vote on the C&I agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Sugars. Ms. Schultz, I'd like to turn it over to you for business and facilities, please.
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of bill list. Number 2, resolution approving transfer of funds to allow funding of construction project East Masonry Wall. Number 3, resolution for the award of bids. Number 4, resolution for the awards of transportation. Number 5, resolution for the award of change orders. And Ms. Sugars, just before I ask for a second, can we just clarify on number 2? I am correct that we are just transferring money on that. We're not oh, I'm sorry. May I get a second? Sorry about that. Thanks. Mrs. Seidel. Thanks. Are there any questions other than the one I've asked before the second? Thank you.
We are transferring funds for that project because the project cost came in slightly more than the original project estimate. So we are moving some funds left over from other projects to that project to fund the excess cost.
Thank you. Are there any other additional questions? Seeing none.
Are there any abstentions on particular items under the B&F agenda?
Mrs. Sugars, I need to abstain to Bayada Home Health on the bill list, please.
All right. Other than Mrs. Schultz's abstention, we have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin, will you please move human resources?
Yes, I will. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. 1, termination of employment certificated. 2, termination of employment non-certificated. 3, appointments certificated. 4, appointments non-certificated. 5, assignment salary change certificated. 6, assignment salary change non-certificated. And 7, other compensation certificated. Do I have a second? Oh, Is there something else? Okay, and then we do have the pink sheet. I don't think there's any additional items on this one. But so there's additions on the pink sheet. I don't believe there's any additional items, but there are. So do I have a second? Ms. Schultz. Any questions? If not, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, the online voting is open. Are there any abstentions for the HR agenda? Okay, we have a unanimous vote on the HR agenda.
Thank you. Mrs. Neary, will you please move P&L?
Certainly. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying investigation decisions. Number 2, action consent to approve policy and legislation item 16.1. But we also have 2 green sheets with item 16.3, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying hearing decision, and item 16.4, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying hearing decisions. Do I have a second? Oh, apologies, it did not come down. Sorry. Sorry about that. Do I have a second? Ms. Friedel? Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, the online voting is open. If there's any abstentions on particular items for the P&L agenda?
I'm abstaining from, is it 16/2007?
Any others? Okay. We have, the motion carries.
Thank you. There are no items for strategic planning tonight, so we will move into our second public comment. This is the second opportunity to comment on any item. If you would like to speak now, please speak into the microphone and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen behind me will indicate the amount of time you have remaining.
Hello, my name is Jeff Podowitz. I live in 110 Cobra Drive, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm reading from testimony of Sharon Joshio, Cherry Hill School Board, March 20th, 2007. She was, she talked about, I've mentioned it before, but specifically, she mentioned that general fund state aid is $14,992,193. That was in that year, March 20th, 2007. Moving forward, and you all can read it, I'm going to give you a copy of it, but moving forward, there was the back that I've never read, and that was from the superintendent, from President of the Board of Education, and Sharon Joshio. And what was mentioned at that time was this small increase, that because we got a little bit of an increase, just 3%, required to equalize our state aid with that of other districts in our district factor group. The ranking is based on community relative, and they talk about the fact that we went from I to GH. And they said, in short, Cherry Hill is not receiving its fair share. What you need to understand is she wrote that way back then. If you adjust the aid for inflation that we got then of $14,990,000, it comes up to $21+ million. And she mentioned how terrible it was, how little it was. Well, guess what? We get $18.4 million this year. We've gone backwards adjusting for inflation. It is pretty bad. Do I believe we should do litigate? Yeah, because that worked for the Abbott districts, that worked for the Chesterfield and the Kingsway School District, right? It worked for Tom's River. It's working. You have to threat, you have to rattle sabers, unfortunately, because that's all the state understands. 2, history. I don't know if you mentioned there was a book by Jonathan Kozol called Savage Inequalities. You're shaky, so you know the book. Okay, I think that's what we still have that reputation. There was an article, Confessions of a White Teacher in an Urban School, and she graduated from Cherry Hill. She's a professor at Rowan. And what she said was, and hopefully I'll get it out, which I guess it won't, but she said, nothing in my life prepared me. Cherry Hill, my hometown, is mentioned in Jonathan Kozol's Savage Inequalities as the rich set of neighborhoods juxtaposed with Camden is the town that doesn't allow the impoverished students just down the road to receive an equitable education. Maybe that is what the rest of the state's attitude is to Cherry Hill. Do I think that's right? No. But that's what that book, according to her, said. Okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Miriam Stern, 121 Ashford Road, back talking about robotics. Just to make sure it's said again, it's been said before in these public meetings, but just a reminder that there was a teacher who had worked on behalf of, as a union representative in another district, and she said there are 2 remedies to be able to change a contract issue mid-contract. One of them is an addendum that can be done, and the other is a non-precedence letter. And that would be, those are 2 remedies that would allow the district, or at least another district that's been done, to decide to stipend a club advisor or club advisor positions. And this is critical because the robotics season ends at the end of April. That's when the World Championships take place. And then the new season starts the next week. So this new season will start in May, and that is the time, at the end of the season is when the club advisor, Mr. Joe Dilks, who has been the volunteer unpaid advisor for 10 years, is stepping down. So if these remedies are not resolved by May, the students who are involved with the club will no longer be able to proceed, and students from around the entire world will start learning the new game. Then they'll build their new robots, they'll order their new parts, and Cherry Hill will not be able to do that if we wait until the contract negotiations are resolved with the Cherry Hill Education Association. So just to paint the picture, we're really kind of down to the wire. And in speaking to, different people who are involved, the level of time involved, I think it's pretty clear. People recognize it's not a one-person job to be a club advisor, and it's a year-round club. So I'm excited to see that the district, from an academic standpoint, is moving forward, is offering a robotics class next year. I think that's one piece our district has to move in the direction of is developing our STEM offerings and giving our children opportunities that they're now very behind in. The other piece is supporting the extracurriculars like the robotics club. I had a chance to visit the World Champions, which was a New Jersey school from last year. They have a maker lab. They have an innovation center that I asked the paid robotics club advisor, how did you get your district to get on board with this? And he said, I finally got the superintendent to understand that we were behind and we needed to catch up. And I was amazed. They had AI, artificial intelligence. They teach rocket science. They teach robotics. They teach facial recognition software that they're developing for their own schools. He said there are 8 of those labs in public schools just up north and many down here. We are so behind. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yoni Yaris, 329 Cherry Hill Boulevard. And the more wild and crazy idea, I think all of us are aware of the situation going on at the Kingston Pool and their debt burden. For many, many years, I think for as long as my family's been in Cherry Hill, we've been schlepping our kids from east and west to a third party and paying exorbitant fees and busing and all of that. Has the district taken a cost estimate for us to buy or work out a private-public partnership to take over the Kingston Pool, put a roof on it, turn it into a year-round facility and use it for our public school kids, and then rent it back to Kingston to use during the summer? It's something that we're one of the districts not to have a pool, and just something, one, we could help save a landmark for the community, and then also get rid of us having to pay rent elsewhere. And I also would caution against opening up the contract midterm. This is Cherry Hill. For those of us who've been around here a while, we do it once. Other people like to ask for it again. And if we were to do this in this one case, I am fearful 4 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, when I'm still going to be around, and some of you might not be around, what does that mean for our community to open things up, let the process run its course? And I think we do need to have a conversation with the community about what is our paid advisors, who aren't our paid advisors, and what that looks like, and what is that high school curriculum. But I think we are doing that process right now very well. Strategic planning, it just takes time. I've had to learn that the hard way over my time. Just let the process run its course, and I appreciate all of the time you guys have put in. It hasn't been easy. It won't continue to get any easier until we get this bond passed in a couple of years. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ann Einhorn, 1017 Edgemore Road. So, thank you, Mrs. Stoffman, from the bottom of my heart and the community's heart. What you have accomplished is just phenomenal to me. I've had the privilege to get to know Eleanor in the last year, and she doesn't change, and thank God for that. I would like to see a copy of the letter to Sweeney on the website, if that's possible. I understand the concerns about fair funding, but I am very disheartened in this community. It's almost as if because we got another $1 million last year that we're done. At the last meeting, thanks Mr. Ovadia and Mrs. Seidel attended as the board representation, but there are 5 other community members there. That's it. And 2 of us are old. Okay. I don't know what it's going to take to get this community engaged. I don't have the strength. I do not have children in the system. I am fully engaged in helping get more funding. I can't do it. 5 people can't do it. So whatever help the PTAs can give us, or what have you, or other community organizations, I am sure Laurie Deitch is all ears, and so would I. I am encouraged that Mayor Angulo last night mentioned the fact that there will be a meeting with administration, hopefully regarding pilot programs. I am very much excited about that. I have gone outside the system. I've gone to Burlington County for their representation. There's Troy Singleton and Ryan Peters, who Troy Singleton's working on pilot programs, and Ryan Peters, who I have a meeting with in April, unfortunately I can't get one sooner, is working on funding. So I'm kind of going outside the boundaries of Cherry Hill. We'll see what happens. I thank you all for your time. I know it's not easy. I know there are many difficult decisions. Been there, done that. There's much to come. I will distribute the vitamins that you're going to need in the discussions that are ahead. But I would like, Dr. Malash, would you please tell me once again how many other clubs do not have paid advisors? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
1313 Marlcrest. This is a small thing, but sometimes it's those little things. So in an effort to be more green, I would ask that we consider doing away with staff sign-in sheets. Currently they are one-sided, and I sign in the morning and at lunch. One time I don't know who it was, I can't remember, but I asked someone what they did with those papers at the end of the year, and they said, oh, they just throw them out. So just maybe we could try to reduce our paper use here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Dr. Malash, is there anything you want to follow up on?
A few things, and thank you for folks who shared perspective. I do encourage you, if you have not read Savage Inequalities, it is a seminal piece. Jonathan Kozol, he has a number of books that are out there. I actually have a couple of extra copies if anybody wants to borrow one. Chapter 4 is the chapter that focuses specifically on Camden and Cherry Hill. So I would encourage folks to read that. Dr. Potowitz, I'm not familiar with the other title, but I will look for it, right? Confessions of a White Teacher in an Urban School. But I think you said it was? It's an article. Okay. We'll find it and go through. I do have a meeting set up. Mr. Dilks requested a meeting with parents from the robotics program at East and Dr. Perry and I think we're set up for the beginning of March, first week in March. Negotiation process, as we've talked about, is ongoing right now between the district and the Teachers Association, so that those pieces are there. Regardless of that, again, we continue to talk to, this is one of the things we will talk about at the school, about asking parents, asking staff members, asking community members, and the groups, the folks, some of the parents that I've spoken to, and Ms. Stern has talked about it up here at the microphone, that they are looking for multiple people to be involved. That would be fantastic. Even some of the alums, that came out, all we need somebody to be able to do to supervise kids on their own is to get a sub-cert. We can do the rest and kind of work it out on our own. So if people are involved, encourage them to continue to talk about it and to look at it and let us know. Yoni, we've talked a little bit just in passing about Kingston Pool. We honestly don't believe that the pool, the way that it was constructed all those years ago, is set up to be heated, and what it would look like because of the size of the pool deck and the area around it, whether or not it is viable for something that could be used indoor. We did have a passing discussion about that, to go through. Folks at the pool have not approached us as a school district. I'm a firm believer we should have a natatorium, in Cherry Hill, and a great idea for a public-private partnership, honestly, as we talk about things that can be done. Natatorium would be a huge one. I have a couple of suggestions of spaces if anyone wants to talk about that offline. But I don't think it's going to be the Kingston pool to go through. That's there. Contract. All right. Fair funding. So the letter will get posted as soon as it gets mailed. So I have the final copy of it here. I had Lisa sign a piece of it tonight. The background documentation. So she just put her signature on it, so it is ready to go. One of the things that's in the letter, even from the folks that were at the Alternative Funding Committee, is that I also received the documents from the Cherry Hill Fair Funding Committee, so I'm including that, right? So it's a combined document that goes through and gives additional perspective from Cherry Hill Fair Funding, which then in terms of text and then in graphs goes through and shows the difference between Cherry Hill and Eastern Regional and Lenape Regional, Washington Township, Brick Township, Toms River, both in dollar amounts and the percentage of the budget, so that it's graphical and it's in color. We can include that, so it'll go out. The initial letter is to Senator Sweeney. It's copied to Mayor Angulo, Assembly Majority Leader Greenwald, Assemblywoman Lampitt, our Fair Funding Committee, Zone PTA, the Board of Education. We'll post it on our website. Mrs. Wilson in our social media and in our newsletter. We'll link to it so that to remind people about where it is. It's an important time for people, and for those of you that talked about it tonight, can continue to get folks to share voices. The governor will be giving his address at the end of the month. We should be getting funding numbers right after that, and it is an important time for the discussion to continue and for Cherry Hill's voice, which has been loud and heard, continue to be heard. So that will be up. I'm going to anticipate probably tomorrow, once we get it all in and make sure that it is compliant, and get it ready to go up on the website. So we have that set to go. We certainly can talk, Allie, about the sign-in sheets. I can tell you they should be keeping them, right? That's one of the official records we have to keep is when staff is there. I believe that somebody told you. I have no doubt. We actually have a pilot program at the high schools. Ms. Adrian, is it both of the high schools? One of the high schools with the electronic card access, that's how they're using to signify that they have arrived for work. Again, the goal is electronic access is provided at every one of the schools, which certainly is a lot cleaner. And then there's an electronic record when folks sign in. It's much more convenient and an easier process to use. So we have started that this year as a pilot, and we will look to see what that looks like moving forward. But it's a great question. I think that's all.
Thank you. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Avadia and Ms. Friedel. All in favor? Motion carries. Have a great night. Happy Valentine's Day, and I hope the students have a great 4-day weekend.